Still says not connected for some reason. Can you see us?
Oh, there we go. I've joined the room.
Oopsie doopsie. Share it to my personal page. Well, alrighty. Checky.
Checking levels. How are you sounding over there? Good?
I think so, yes.
Oh, I only had one headphone on.
Oh, that would be dizzying.
Sounds a lot better now.
And knock you off of balance there.
Yeah.
Jimmy, Captain Jimmy.
Captain Jimmy in the house.
Yeah, I didn't bring any heroin. I did eat a couple of weed gummies though.
Yeah, me too.
Did you really?
Well, I mean, it was earlier. I don't think I'm feeling much now.
Okay, yeah. Mine. I was half an hour ago, so I was noticing they usually kick in for me initially after about an hour or so.
Oh yeah, no.
Give me about
mine's pretty good. 40, half an hour to 45 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. So we have like gummies and also these like little liquid gel things.
Oh yeah, I think I've tried those.
Yeah, and so those ones they seem to kick in pretty good. But yeah, maybe I should go grab one.
I like the gummies because you get that little burst of flavor as well.
Yeah, I like the chocolates actually.
Oh really? I had
because you get like a really good chocolate. Like some of them are really good.
Well, that's the issue that I have. Is the first time I had weed chocolate is that like I didn't really know that you're not supposed to eat the whole chocolate, and it was a nightmare experience. I was lying in bed staring in the ceiling with like these warm flashes going through my chest, and I thought I was having a heart attack. It was not pleasant at all. So,
well,
I have to be careful. But I the ones I like now are they're called pearls.
Yes, yeah.
Those are the ones I like. Particularly
those. I mean, I don't. They're not super strong. I think, right?
No, each one is about 2 milligrams.
Yeah. So you can kind of take how many you need, depending on the situation.
Yeah. And again, because when I started, I would have like one to start with. Now, if I really kind of want to get going, I'll have like 3 to start with. I only had 2 today because I didn't want to go nuts.
Yeah. Those liquid gels we have are 10s. So
each. Yeah, exactly.
So it's like you have one, and then it's kind of like you gotta feel it out later if you want to take any more.
And that's the thing is because I could probably most of the time do 10, but it's just I'd rather go slow and deterministic, right? Just
the gummies that we normally get are 25s each.
Oh wow.
So we're kind of like
gummy?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, well, we go to the res. So I mean the one thing there is they're not always evenly dispersed throughout the whole thing. But you usually kind of start by having a half. Right, you bite it in half, and then
makes sense.
Save the other half. But sometimes it's like one half is more potent than the like they're not.
They're
not quite the same like precise quality that you get out of like the government stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're doing them whole, then it
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But sometimes when you bite one half versus the other, like there's inconsistencies there. But I mean, it's a good deal.
I bet.
Way better pricing.
I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, my tolerance is still not super high, so I don't need anything too strong at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, we don't do them often enough to be like, 25 is nothing. Like, some of our friends,
who we won't name,
who shall remain nameless. Yeah, so there's still some mystery there. There's still some potency. Yeah,
and it's good to know. I mean, it's for me. I just like having a known quantity. Like I know what I get out of the pearls, and I like the experience.
Well, and the thing, with the pearls is like we have I think still a bottle of those, and it's nice because it's like you can kind of build how many you need
Yeah, exactly.
versus like, oh, I got to bite it in half or water it down or whatever, right?
And if I bite it in half, will I get the strong half of the weak half?
Yeah, exactly. What am I going to get?
Exactly.
Wait, there was 20 in that half and only 5 in the other. Like what?
Mix it better, guys.
Oh, it's just Podbean telling us to do stuff here.
Settle down. I got a couple of emails from Podbean that were like, "Hey, we noticed you haven't gone live in a while."
Oh, they're just everybody's on our case, eh?
Right? Yeah, no, even our provider is like, "Get off your ass and do a podcast."
The platform itself is like, "Wait a minute, why aren't you guys doing this more often?"
Yeah, blame is to be placed all over the place. It was a busy summer for you.
Yeah.
We were going to go live last week, but I was a dumbass and got COVID instead.
Well, I mean, it's still out there, I guess.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And
you just got to stop making out with so many random strangers, Todd. I've told you this a few times. Like, you just got to calm down, and you maybe won't get COVID so often.
I only wish, and to be, I've only had COVID twice, and the last time was in 2022.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to be making out with more random people. That
to build up your tolerance.
To build up my tolerance. No, it was my filthy child came over for a weekend and spread it to me. So, and I'm fine now, but I'm like you can still kind of hear it in my voice that there's a sinus thing going on.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ever going to go away now. I'm starting to wonder.
Well, yeah.
It may just sound like this forever now.
Sometimes stuff like, there's the long COVID or whatever where you're better, but you're not. Like stuff, just symptoms go on and on and on for a long time. But
well, I know for a few days afterwards, I was very, very conscious of like, has my taste changed? Does this still taste like it used to? Because that's the thing I'm worried about.
I better taste a bunch of these gummies. Just to make sure.
Yeah. And I better try all of my favorite beers and all of my favorite whiskeys to make sure.
Only one way to find out.
Only one way to find out. I need to get a doctor's prescription for all these things so that I can get them nice and cheap. I need to test my palate.
The government liquor store takes prescriptions, right?
They should, right?
They should. Yeah. Many years ago, speaking of odd prescriptions, many years ago, I had a friend who was prescribed to continue smoking
cigarettes.
Yeah, by a doctor, just because of the effects of like the stress of getting off of it at that time. I don't know if it was like an actual prescription, like written down, but that was like the doctor's recommendation is like, you're not in the place.
Are you sure that this guy wasn't maybe slightly misrepresenting what his doctor said?
No. I mean, it was just like the stress of that, of like the withdrawal at the time combined with other things that were going on.
So that there were other maybe physical problems.
Yeah. And it
like been exacerbated by
the stress of the withdrawal would have not been ideal to heal those other things. So yeah, it was like, you got to get through X and Y before you can quit smoking.
Oh man, you're fucked up when
exactly. When your doctor's
you are
like
so unhealthy that quitting smoking will make it worse.
Yeah, that's not a good situation, right?
Oh my god.
They're better now, but
that's good.
That's an odd situation to be in, right? Yeah, that's not ideal.
Because
when your doctor's like, you might want to hold off on quitting smoking because it could really fuck shit up.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's hard. That was like, I quit smoking in 2010, and it was the hardest thing I ever did, probably.
Yeah.
And I did it cold turkey.
That's a tough way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but what ended up happening, because I was trying to use the patch, and I went to work one day, and I was so stressed out and just pissed off at everybody.
Yeah.
And I get to the end of the day and I realized it's because I forgot to put on my patch. But I also remembered that I had read that basically you only need 3 days to get past the physical addiction.
I'd heard it was up to 2 weeks for the physical.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe my information was wrong, but I had heard that basically
probably most intense the first 3 days.
3 days. Yeah. And I remember reading that it was in threes as well. Like 3 days was the first hard part, then the next 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And then 3 months. And then from there, you're kind of in the more or less in the clear from there.
Yeah.
And so because I had already basically done 1 day and only was going to need 2 more days of cold turkey.
You're like,
to
I
get
got
through it.
this.
Yeah.
Power through, man.
And I think it was either the weekend or it was like going into Christmas break. And I basically gave myself permission to just stay in bed because I'd never smoked in bed. That was never my thing. I would have a smoke as soon as I got up.
Yeah.
But like I figured as long as I stayed in bed, read a book, tried to sleep, nap, whatever.
Yeah.
And I just did whatever I needed to do to get through those 3 days. And then the other thing I had to learn was I can never, ever, ever cheat. Never think you can just have one cigarette.
Yeah.
Because that's what had fucked me before.
That's a spiral right there.
Yeah. I had quit for about 6 months on the patch and then was like, I'll just have one.
Yeah.
And then that was just turns into a spiral.
So. Yeah, that's interesting. My dad, this was before I was born, but he was like 3+ packs a day and he quit cold turkey. And he said it took 8 years until kind of like the cravings, like the mental kind of draw went away. And then after that, like he said it was around that point, and then he never ever had a craving or anything ever again after that. But yeah, 8 years. So
I can't remember how long, like, was it in weeks that I kind of stopped craving it on a regular basis, like just sort of sitting around. Drinking was always a trigger.
Yeah.
And there were times that I'd be drinking. People I was hanging out with would go outside to smoke, and I would go outside and I would ask them to blow smoke in my face so I could smell it.
Yeah.
And that was good enough.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it took before I didn't have any cravings while I was drinking. It did take me probably 10-ish years before maybe a little bit less than that before. Oh no, it's probably not that long at all. Actually, it was like 2013. I had my first cigar. So 3 years before I had my first cigar. And I only got the cigar to celebrate the sale of my house in Williams Lake.
Mm-hmm. But I did not inhale.
No, well, I didn't. I didn't actually. No, because you're not supposed to with cigars.
No, you're not. No,
it's all about like just taste and mouthfeel and that sort of thing. And I think that's why cigar-related cancers are like mouth cancers and esophageal cancers, not lung cancer. But these days, I only have like one cigar, maybe every 2 years or something. So
well, that's good.
I don't think it's
now. If we could just get off the heroin, I think we'd both be just doing great.
You know, if we had a pound cake to dunk, that would probably help. Yeah. But we don't.
Yeah, we just got a bit of the black meat for today, and
the black meat, my favorite kind of meat.
The black meat.
Shall we?
Sounds delicious.
Shall we kick this off?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back.
It's been a while.
When bad things happen to good people, a podcast about censorship and the arts. My name's Todd Sullivan. Joining me as always is Peter Rahman.
Hello, hello.
And we are finishing up our look at William Burroughs' Naked. There's something I cut out of our last episode that I'm thinking I was going to put up on our Patreon. It was a long digression about, I think it was us talking about how we were going to try to approach pound cake.
Oh yeah,
for this you know, whether we're going to buy it or like maybe we're going to like cook and then
like
do a live stream of us cooking and all of this. None of that was done, but
no, we it turns out when it comes to like the will to bake things, you know, I like barbecuing things, but like going and buying flour and butter and stuff like that just wasn't on the top of my list of
I did consider like reaching out to a local bakery and saying hey, could you guys make us a pound cake?
Yeah.
And obviously I didn't.
Yeah. Well, you've had other things on the go.
I've had other things on the go. I've been sick and recovering and other things.
Yeah, but you're better now.
I'm better now.
And we're back live. We have no pound cake.
We have no pound cake.
Just you know, for the listeners, if they can just imagine us sitting here with a piece of pound cake, and we would have had to somehow dry it out for.
Well, that's the thing is I would have probably ordered it a week before the episode.
Because you need old stale pound
stale
cake
cake
that you then dunk.
Yeah.
Because dunking the fresh stuff, like,
what does it accomplish?
What's the point? Yeah.
Right. It's a bit like, you're supposed to use stale bread when you're making French toast.
That's right.
Again, you need it to absorb the moisture. Somehow I just love making French toast with like fresh, squishy bread.
Have you done it with Texas toast? You know, like the extra.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
That's probably best. Yeah. I tend to buy sourdough bread though.
Oh yeah,
which is also well. See, I make this is weird, but when I make French toast, I put tomato juice on it.
Yeah, that wouldn't crack my top 50 of things to put on French toast. I would probably.
And it's funny because it's something I grew up with.
Yeah, how did you even?
I grew up with it.
That?
It's apparently like an English thing.
Okay. Yeah.
My mom got it from her dad, and then it was passed on to us as just the way we ate French toast. And then, like, I remember as a child going out for breakfast with my parents and trying to order French toast and being like, what is this?
Where's the rest of it?
I negotiated with my mom on like how to best order it. So I think like we ordered French toast and also like a glass of tomato juice.
Yeah.
But then it still comes with like powdered sugar on it and stuff. And it's like, this is not going to work.
Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah, it's when you think about it, I don't think it's that odd. My mom explained it as like, you compare it to people who put ketchup on their eggs, which I think is disgusting.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big fan of ketchup to begin with. But yeah, there's something about the I really like to load it up with butter. So you get this like saltiness and the hot with the cold and the savoriness of the tomato juice, and it's just really good.
It's like a breakfast bruschetta in a way.
Kind of, yeah.
Tomato juice,
and it's a bit like a chunkier Bloody Mary.
Yeah. A breakfast Bloody Mary. French toast style.
I have actually tried doing it with clamato juice once.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't really love it.
Well, especially if you've already done a whole bunch of butter, then you're now like kind of extra salty, right? Like,
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also tried it with V8.
Okay.
Mostly because all the tomato juices are like they're cans and not very resealable. I wish I could get one that I could like open and then close and have it resealed again, because I'm always afraid of it sitting in the fridge open and getting bad. I don't know how long it's good for.
And cans just open in the fridge, like, it gets bad pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, yeah. As far as pound cake goes, is that not kind of like a British or European thing?
Probably.
I don't know.
It's a pretty traditional thing.
I feel like
down to like the name telling you how to make it, because it's a pound of each ingredient.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I think was part of what kept me from making it, because I'm like,
yeah, we're gonna have a lot of pound cake,
right? You're gonna end up with 4 pounds of
That's
cake,
right? Yeah, we do not need 4 pounds.
Which
of cake.
I don't need 4 pounds of anything in my house.
That's right.
Here's the history at Wikipedia. It is believed that the pound cake is of Northern European origin and dates back to the early 18th century. The recipe for pound cake appears in The Art of Cookery by Hannah Glass, published in 1747. The first U.S. cookbook, American Cookery, published in 1796, has a recipe for pound cake.
Wow. Well, there you go.
There you go.
I mean, if it's in the name, do you need a recipe? Like,
if the recipe is in the name, probably not.
Yeah.
It's
part of me is glad that we don't have a whole bunch of pound cake and stuff to be dunking. We do have a little bit of electronic equipment and things around,
I guess.
Splashing pound cake and coffee
just
or whatever
dunk
all over
like
the place.
A lunatic.
I mean, I gotta stay true to the book. So I guess
it means you have to like drop your pound cake
into
your vein.
You get a safety pin and
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, part of me is glad that we're not doing the pound cake, although it would have been interesting.
Would have been fun
to try it.
Maybe we'll save that. We'll do a special episode with multiple foods inspired by the things that we've covered.
Or if we end up doing a banned foods episode at some point.
What, has pound cake ever been banned?
No, it hasn't, but we could have pound cake there just as like a
Oh, I
a
see.
food
As a
callback
reference, a
from
food
from
callback. While we,
another
but I
episode.
think if we're doing banned food, we would need to be eating the banned food.
Right, but we could do a warm up
Unless we're eating food that's banned in our country, and then we probably
Yeah, well, pounds, like that's imperial measuring system, so I mean that's technically
that's true.
no.
What is
just making a weird case?
What would we call it in metric?
I don't know.
What's the metric name for pound?
454 gram cake, like it'd be odd. It's a mouthful.
Welcome to Pound Cake Talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about the book, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do.
The book that features pound cake.
The book that features pound cake and heroin and a lot of jism and ectoplasm and protoplasm. And a lot of plasms.
A lot of plasms, a lot of just very interesting situations that may or may not be real. One thing during the book, which is a trip to read through.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing anyone ever having lunch naked.
You're right.
That is one thing where I was like, I don't think that the title.
It's possible that you were digging for a more literal interpretation of the title.
And that's my joke, but
but there is an explanation for the title. It's probably at the Wikipedia page. I want to get
probably somewhere in the.
It is somewhere in the book, but I think I can probably find it faster at the Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Maybe
because it's an interesting kind of shift, right? You have naked lunch, something's going to be, that's not an ordinary title to begin with, but the book digresses all over the place, and it's not super clear how we're relating it all back to this title.
It has to do with essentially. God damn it, Todd! You should have done your research.
Just put you right on the spot for the title.
Well, I could just pretend I didn't know. It's a lot easier. But I want to get it right because he talks about it specifically. It's like a quote.
Okay. Well, maybe we can come back to that and just head into this.
Well, so the one thing I made one note to myself before coming into this, and it's something I really wanted to mention because I feel like our conversations about the book implied this in a way, but it was never explicitly spoken. This is a really funny book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is that you forget that because it's also really gross sometimes.
Yeah.
And really fucked up sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But it is incredibly funny.
There's some sections of this book where it's pretty laugh out loud.
Yeah.
Like you could picture it as like almost, a sitcom from the 80s or something, like just the way the scene kind of plays out.
But it shows up on an underground station somewhere.
Yeah.
Because it was the moment that I remembered that was like, oh my God, that's hilarious, is when the cops show up and he's shooting up.
Yeah.
And the first thing he says to them is like, hey guys, do you mind if I just finish?
Yeah.
Like, I'm already mostly done and there's already enough heroin on the table for evidence.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he even thought that might work.
I mean, you picture it like some scene out of Chips or something, just like so slapstick and like some weird funky music or something.
And then that continues into that whole like the shootout, the very John Wick-esque. He grabs the gun and shoots him in the head immediately, and there's so much.
But it's
humor.
It's like a fumbling shootout too, like he's fumbling around. And,
some of it is, and some of it isn't. Some of it I feel like it's maybe that's how it played out in his head.
Yeah.
Or I'm not even saying that necessarily happened. I guess
even the little things like where he absorbs the chief inspector or whatever, just like very comedic. Like, there's it's kind of
the guy who brought
gross or whatever,
looking for ketchup in the fancy restaurant. That was one of my favorite stories. There's a lot of humor in this.
Yeah.
If you can get to it.
Yeah.
If you can make it through the parts that either aren't as funny or aren't as easy to follow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of humor in this book, which I think is forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, the key to this book is to just, I think, always remember that it's a series of vignettes. Like, it's not a cohesive story, right?
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, there's characters that repeat, and there's a kind of a bit of a loose thread with this company of Islam Inc. and that kind of stuff, but it's a lot of just collection of stories. Sometimes we get introduced to a character and then we never really see or hear from them again, or they're maybe mentioned and at one point, and then we get a little story about them later on in the book or something like that, right? Like, it's not a very linear piece.
No.
It's not very highly connected across all the chapters.
It's
And
almost better, I think, to think of it as like a short story collection,
yeah,
as a
yeah,
series of maybe vaguely interrelated short stories,
yeah,
but also maybe not.
yeah.
There's a couple where one thing leads directly into the other.
Yeah, there's a few chapters that follow on each other,
Yeah, and there's also
that feels weird too at the time.
at the
'Cause you're like,
time,
I
'cause
just read 3 chapters that had nothing to do with
each other.
yeah.
But there are also like a handful of characters who will like maybe show up here and then again later here.
Yeah.
So there are these kind of things that keep it woven together as if it's part of a larger tapestry.
Yeah.
But the individual stories are mostly kind of separate and for the most part unrelated.
Yeah. And even the interzone stuff, like when we get into the city of interzone, like it seems to be almost described differently
Yeah.
in different chapters, right? Like where the city is sprawling and then the city is more kind of urban with wide expanses around it. And, the environment is changing. But I think, when we take a look at this book from a whole, that kind of works for it, right? When you're talking about this is like trying to imitate through a book what a heroin trip is like, and all the disjointed, fragmented views of reality, and grotesque yet comedic, and all these things that happen that may or may not be connected to each other. It does a good job, right? Like that. I'm gonna shock, but I've never done heroin, so I don't know how true to life this is, but William S. Burroughs certainly had his fair share of experiences.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, for most people, it would be pretty tough to capture that in words and capture it in a sense where just reading through it, you go, wow, this is wild. And like, I'm starting to understand what this would physically and mentally be like to be on this drug. So that disjointed, that separated, yet there's sometimes threads that weave back together. I think that all plays in favor of the ultimate kind of reading of this book, which is, hey, like what would it be like if I took a heroin trip and made a book out of it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it works.
And there's a certain amount too of, and I don't know a lot about Burroughs' history, but I do know that he was married at one point to a woman, and then eventually.
Well, that's better than a coconut or
True.
something. Yeah.
No, but that's I say that because he did eventually sort of explore homosexuality.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's a lot of what's maybe going on in some of the goopier parts of this book.
Yeah, there is a lot of like
is-
young boy stuff.
Yes.
Homoeroticism.
And there's that bit with the one character and Dr.
Benway.
Where Benway is trying to like find
Convince
out
him that he.
well, not I don't know if it's convince him, but like look for
Yeah.
the unhealthy sexual stuff. Essentially, like he's trying to prove this guy's gay.
Yeah.
Because that's gross and unpleasant and
That's
wrong.
right. Yeah.
So I suspect that there is an amount of this book that is about, processing this new kind of sensation, this new attraction that maybe you had repressed before. And I do know that from, I shouldn't say no, but from what I've read, his decision to go to Tangier was because it was an area that culturally was more open to homosexuality and to drug use.
Yeah.
So it's like, if those are your two major fascinations, go where the play is good.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What happens in Tangier?
I'd like to see that travel brochure, but come to Tangiers. Do you like young boys and heroin?
Yeah.
Well,
come enjoy the black meat.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's an interesting tidbit to know because, I mean, there's certainly a lot of sexual content in different ways in this book, but it is, I think, to the majority where it is has a homosexual slant, or male on male slant. There's lots of other kind of stuff happening in this book, but yeah, if he was kind of playing with those themes personally, then they certainly come through in the book. I think the one thing that is odd is the young boy part of it, right? Like, um, that to me was like, I don't know, like, is that like a Hollywood-esque type thing, right? Where it's like these young stars and starlets and that kind of stuff, right? It's always about the young and the new and that kind of thing. If that was part of it, or if just he thought older dudes were a little haggard.
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine that given that Tangier was open to homosexuality and that sort of thing, there's going to be a draw to homosexuals of various styles, let's say, right?
Mhm.
So in the same way that it might bring older men looking for younger men, it might attract younger men who are looking to be taken care of by an older man, or
Sure.
who
Yeah.
want to exploit an older man for money,
Yeah.
or whatever. So I think that to an extent that's probably why the young men or the young boys
Features prominently.
are there in the
Yeah.
story and are there in Tangier, beyond just them being sort of necessary to the plot that Burroughs was writing.
Mhm.
Um, should we talk a little bit again about how this book was banned?
Yeah. Let's go through that.
Um,
I mean, there's a lot in here that would hit pretty hard in the States in a lot of places, I would
yeah, but
imagine.
see,
Right?
that's where this is kind of an interesting one, because this isn't a situation of it being banned in like a school, which is the case for a lot of books we read. I don't think outside of like a university setting, I don't see this book getting into schools.
Yeah.
I would concur that we should not let the grade.
If you see this in an elementary library, probably a mistake.
I mean, maybe like advanced English, high school, maybe, but I don't know outside of looking at experimental writing styles. I don't know that there's necessarily a lot here. Maybe I'm wrong.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that we've mentioned, like the comedic aspect to it, in combination or juxtaposition with like the almost grotesque, is you know the defense that we'll talk about in terms of this being a real object of art.
Yeah.
Like that style, that the combination of these different styles, whether it's the short story aspect, whether it's the you know the the writing that can be so profound yet grotesque, or comedic, or what have you, in one sentence or one paragraph, and then the next sentence be almost backwards from that.
And also writing that from line to line, each line might make sense consistently within itself, but that doesn't connect to the next line. Like it's almost like a precursor to the cut up method that he would eventually use.
Yeah. So, there's a lot in here as far as things to study, right? A good variety of different literary devices to study.
But I think it's something that you need to study, not
a little
necessarily
bit
at a higher level. I mean, to some extent, but more so that, like, to me,
you would need a lot of prerequisites maybe before tackling this,
or at least you would need in yourself a deep desire to want to explore something like this, rather than once it's part of like a high school curriculum, it's kind of forced down your throat.
Yeah.
Once you're in university, you've decided.
Speaking of things that happen in the book,
where you've knocked me off of my whatever I was on.
We're talking about like where and how this would actually be studied.
At university, the thing about university is that that's the point where you say, I've decided I want to pursue an interest in literature or this or that or whatever. And so at that point, it would make sense to take something that is this kind of
substantive in a way
and complex in its own way, to dig into it there. Not to say that high school students don't have the intellectual capability to get there. They might, but not all of them want to with something like this. And I think that's fair.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, it's not for necessarily a broad audience.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, let's talk about where and how the
so that's the
banning,
thing is that the nature of this book is that it's not so much banned as that it couldn't be published initially. That was the
Yes.
challenge.
And what's the law that like the obscenities law?
We'll get there in a second.
Okay.
Because before we can even get there, it has to be published. And nobody wanted to publish it initially. So in 1957, Allen Ginsberg submitted Naked Lunch to Olympia Press, and they had published Tropic of Cancer and Lolita. Okay. So they had this history with these controversial books that weren't being published anywhere else. But Olympia rejected the manuscript, arguing that it was inaccessible and lacked structure, both of which I would be inclined to probably agree with.
Yeah.
Ginsberg sent the manuscript at that point to Irving Rosenthal, editor of the Chicago Review. And this is where we're going to get to the trial, because Rosenthal started publishing excerpts of the novel in the Review spring 1958 and autumn 1958 issues. Jack Mabley, a columnist and not a communist. He might have been that too. I don't know. A columnist for the Chicago Daily News, publicly criticized the Chicago Review for publishing obscenity. And in response, the University of Chicago insisted that material from Burroughs and Jack Kerouac could not appear in the upcoming winter issue. Irving Rosenthal resigned from the Review and founded a new literary magazine with Pete Carroll called Big Table, which published the suppressed material in its first issue. And yeah, when we did our first episode, I think I said a few times, fucking Jack Mabley rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, hang on, not him. It's the other guy. Irving Rosenthal.
Yes.
He rocks, because like when his magazine was like,
yeah,
no, you can't publish this. He's like, fuck you, I'll make my own magazine.
Yeah, I'll do it myself.
Do it myself. You want something done right, you got to do it yourself.
But that's where the trial then
started, right? Rosenthal and Carroll planned to mail the first issue of Big Table in March 1959. That was the name of the Big Table was the name of the new magazine he started. However, the U.S. Post Office considered the magazine obscene, which made it unmailable under the Comstock laws. Mm-hmm. On June 4th, 1959, the Post Office launched a formal hearing over Big Table's obscenity, with a particular focus on Burroughs' 10 episodes from Naked Lunch and a short story by Jack Kerouac titled Old Angel Midnight. Joel Sprayrigan, Big Table's attorney, advocated for the magazine's literary value and insisted it was not obscene under the criteria established in Roth versus United States. Pete Carroll, the magazine's co-founder, testified that he considered Burroughs a satirist in the tradition of Jonathan Swift and Nathaniel West, and that his social criticism required vulgar language. William Duvall, the hearing examiner, admitted that Burroughs' work had some intelligible satire, but felt its vulgarity outweighed any literary merit. He ruled that the magazine was, in fact, obscene and could not be mailed. In February 1960, Big Table filed a federal complaint arguing that the Post Office's decision violated the First Amendment. On June 30th, 1960, the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois overturned the Post Office's findings. The Post Office did not appeal the decision.
And it hit the mail right away.
It hit the mail right away.
I gotta imagine there was probably some destroyed packages in that mail out.
But yeah, the Roth v. United States, which was which established the legal definition for obscenity, is I think
that's the famous quote of like,
famous one of
you'll know it if you see it.
Yeah.
That tight legal catchphrase.
The tight legal catchphrase. Yeah, that's what you want from like a court ruling, is something kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah, that's what we pay all this money for.
Interpret some kind of way, because it's so dumb, because it's just going to go back to the courts at a certain point, at a certain level, because it's going to have to be better established than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, bit bonkers. And so yeah, that's basically the banning element of it.
Are there any places still where it's banned?
That
or not able to be published?
An excellent question. Let's see if I can find out. Indiana University has a page about Naked Lunch being banned. Then, oh man, I don't think I knew what William Burroughs' middle name was. It threw me for a second. William Seward Burroughs.
Seward, hey?
Yeah.
That definitely makes him feel older.
It does, right? It was published by Grove Press in 1962. The book was bought to trial on obscenity charges. Case was handled Book cannot be held obscene in view of substantial evidence showing that it is literary, historical, and social importance. Following the decision, the Massachusetts Supreme Court cleared Naked Lunch of obscenity charges. 1962 symposium in Edinburgh, Burroughs argued that censorship is the presumed right of governmental agencies to decide what words and images the citizen is permitted to see. That is precisely thought control. If censorship were removed, perhaps books would be judged more on literary merit, and a dull, poorly written book on a sexual subject would find few readers. Fewer people would be stimulated by the sight of a four-letter word on the printed page. The anxiety and prurience of which censorship is the overt political phenomenon has so far prevented any serious scientific investigation of sexual phenomenon. So there.
Yeah. He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. And it doesn't look like it's been banned anywhere. I'm sure there are countries where the subject matter alone would be, no, you can't come here.
Yeah.
But I think, again, because of the nature of the book,
it's not maybe as actively published and that kind of thing.
And I don't think
those areas, I would imagine.
I don't think anyone is super surprised and getting their panties in a knot over Naked Lunch not being allowed to go into maybe communist China or whatever.
Yeah. This isn't like Heartstopper in your high school.
Yeah, no, like when people go ban that or Harry Potter or something else, that's when you go, what? And it makes headlines and that sort of thing. I'm sure, this is not a book that, even in the countries that it's being published, is going to be read by everybody.
Yeah.
Not even close to everybody. A tiny, tiny percentage of people.
And I've read it, and I don't even know if I've read it.
And exactly. There's going to be people who... I would bet there's a large difference between the number of people who start this book and the number of people who finish this book.
That's right, yeah.
Because it is challenging.
Yeah.
And I think the first chapter in air quotes, is pretty easy to read.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even the first 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So in a way, it fools you at the beginning with this kind of like,
and there is a bit more of a story
sense.
too, right?
Yeah.
About getting out of the city and getting a van, and there's almost a plot and like the language is intense, but there's semblance of a plot, some connection. And then we really go off the rails from there.
Yeah. So I think, and for me at least, like once I'm kind of drawn into a book, I tend to commit to it.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to stop after like the first chapter and just go like, nah, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And it's the whole sunk cost fallacy, which I know is horseshit. Yeah. But I still suffer from it.
I think there's, I don't know, for me, I have a similar issue, and it's more that I'm a bit of a completionist, right?
Right.
Where it's like, if I've started that, like, why wouldn't I finish it, right? Because what was the point of starting it, right? So maybe a little different than kind of the sunk cost argument, but just the sake of why would I pursue something without the goal of completing it?
Yeah.
But that being said, there, every now and then there's things that I'll walk away from, but it's got to be pretty bad.
There has been, to my knowledge, that I can remember, only one book that I have intentionally walked away from. There's a handful that, like, because of situations in my life, I just sort of stopped reading and then couldn't get back into it again.
But I mean, Dr. Seuss is tough, right?
He is tough, sometimes. The one I couldn't finish was The Martian.
Oh.
And I wanted to read it because I loved the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue I had with the book was funny because, like, what I loved about the movie was how real everything felt and how well researched and how, like, this is how you would have to do it. The issue I had with the book is that there was even more than that. To the point
like it was over the top.
It was to the point that I was fucking bored.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't get through this. This guy's spending so much time talking about like how things are whatever.
The irrigation and system,
like, nope,
potatoes, and
I'm out.
Yeah.
This feels more like a textbook than entertainment. So anyway.
Well, yeah, if there's like 3 chapters on like the hereditary way we've bred potatoes, like, that could be a tough go.
Yeah. And I tried. I think I got about halfway through, but I just was like, no, the amount of joy I'm getting from this is so small, if at all, that it's work.
Yeah.
There's nothing good here.
Wait, why are there questions in the middle of this chapter? Why is there a quiz? What's happening?
There was a movie made of Naked Lunch.
Yes, there was.
It was a movie made by my favorite Canadian filmmaker.
Oh, yeah.
David Cronenberg.
Yeah.
It came out in 1991. And Naked Lunch was long considered unfilmable, which I think if you were trying to do a proper adaptation of the book, it would be.
Yeah.
And I think,
well, or like maybe not unfilmable, but like the continuity, it would be not that there haven't been movies like that, right? But yes, it wouldn't be a wide release film.
No, and I think exactly. And I think Cronenberg said that if you tried to make a direct adaptation of the book, it would cost $500 million and be banned on every country on earth.
Yeah.
So what he did with the film is it ends up being kind of a combination of a biography of Burroughs, somewhat fictionalized biography of Burroughs, with a scattering of elements from Naked Lunch in it.
Okay.
So it kind of covers, like at the beginning of the film, William Lee, who is sort of the narrator and protagonist of the actual book, and is also Burroughs'
Burroughs
surrogate.
Yeah.
He lives in New York, and he is what do you call he kills bugs. He's an exterminator.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a reference right there from the book. There's an exterminator. And his wife starts injecting the bug powder he uses to kill bugs.
As one would.
As one would.
Just so everyone is aware, I tried to download the link for this movie and I was not able to get it to work. So Todd has seen it and I have not.
Yeah, so
I think I read the synopsis.
And I did want to talk about the movie a little bit because it's a good movie. It's a weird movie. I do think in a lot of ways it captures the feel of Naked Lunch. It probably got less ectoplasm and jism, but no,
those are big budget items.
But also I would say that it's got a lot of sort of implied ectoplasm and jism. Not a lot of it. You don't see it on the screen necessarily, but there's weird shit going on.
Yeah.
But it's also about writing. Sort of one of the things like Burroughs ends up he loses his job because he's been injecting the bug powder. And
like the William Lee character in the movie.
William Lee, yeah.
Okay.
There's a bit with the cops where we have Hauser and O'Brien.
Oh yeah.
They bring him in for questioning because they think this bug powder. He's lost his canister. Actually, I think his wife has injected it all, but he's claimed he's lost it, and so the cops think he's been using it as drugs. And so the cops are like, okay, well, we're gonna. Oh no, oh god, never mind. I'm screwing it all up. The point being that Lee ends up going to Interzone
to like get away from the heat, or
to write.
Oh, okay.
He's sent there by a giant talking insect, who is his handler.
Yeah. So a reference to the scene in the book with the scientists and the giant insect. Yeah. Okay.
So he sends him to Tangier to write reports. So he goes to Tangier. Prior to this, he's shot his wife in the head.
Okay.
It's just kind of a quick throwaway. He does this. He's got some friends over. They're kind of partying, and he says to his wife,
"Did he get the gun out of a suitcase?"
No, I think it was a drawer.
Missed opportunity.
He says to his wife, "It's time for our William Tell act," and she puts a glass on her head. And he shoots, but misses the glass and shoots her in the head, which is something that happened to Burroughs.
Oh,
they were living in Mexico. Literally, I think they had people over. He said, "It's time for a William Tell act." She put the glass in his head. She shot her in the head, and then he ran from Mexico.
Oh wow! Interesting.
And he said that if not for that, he never would have become a writer.
Oh. So when he ran, it wasn't with the intention of becoming a writer.
I don't think so.
Stumbled into it later.
I think he stumbled into it later. Maybe as a way to process what had happened.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too is that like with her, he was in the middle of a life that was going in a certain trajectory. And if something hadn't happened to disrupt that trajectory, he probably just would have continued in that direction. So because this film is really looking at what it meant, what it is as a writer, and how Burroughs himself, functions as a writer.
Mhm.
That's an important part of the story. He goes to Interzone. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to tell you the whole movie. The point is,
it doesn't really follow the book.
it doesn't really follow the book, but it very much captures the spirit of the book. Mugwumps appear.
Okay.
Typewriters turn into giant insects that talk to you. Benway shows up not dressed as, but like never mind.
Spoiler alert.
It's not even spoilers. It's just such a weird movie. It's almost impossible to describe.
But it gives a very heroin trip type feel in the Tangiers zone.
To an extent. Yeah. I would, and the homosexual aspect of it, I feel like is pretty big in the film too.
Okay.
There's a point where, and I think this was a line from later in the book. One of the bug creatures is talking to him and says, being pretending to be a homosexual is the best cover an agent can have.
Yeah.
And so I think there's moments in the film that are again like they're symbolic of Burroughs experiencing these sort of new desires and those sorts of things. So yeah, I found it a really fascinating movie, and I think it's definitely worth watching. To anyone who's, even if you haven't read Naked Lunch, if you're just sort of curious about Burroughs himself
and his life,
but also kind of to get a tone, or a taste almost of the book.
So it's kind of semi-biographical
in the
film, yeah.
But even within the biographical elements, I don't know. Like, I'm pretty sure. Well, I do believe he worked as an exterminator at one point, but I'm not aware of him ever like injecting bug powder. But I think that was done narratively to start him on this drug journey.
Yeah.
So that when these things happen, where like the cops bring him in, and then they put this giant insect in front of him that's like, "Hello, I am your rep." He's like, I don't know if this is real or if I'm fucking high as fuck.
Am I still on the powder?
Exactly. And it's yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm still gonna try and watch it, but I was disappointed I couldn't get the link to work.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I think it's one of Cronenberg's top tier films, probably in a top 5 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I downloaded 4 gigs of stuff, but I couldn't get it to work.
Yeah, so, my apologies.
Yeah, hey, no worries. It's probably my crappy players and stuff that I don't spend money on.
I was lucky enough to get it onto a thumb drive and play it on my big TV, so it was like very filmesque.
Right on. So while looking for this, I checked out a few other places, and I did see there's I can't remember the year, but there is another film,
really,
Naked Lunch, that's like a short film.
Okay.
Hang on, let me just see here if I can get the synopsis of it up. So yes, in 2008, Naked Lunch by Henrik Boudard. In this version of the classic book, the crew makes a new point of view of the sounds of this great literary piece. After developing an addiction to the substance he uses to kill bugs, an exterminator accidentally kills his wife because... Oh no, I guess it's kind of the same, but movie. It's like redone, I guess.
What?
As like a... It sounds like they're talking about maybe the Cronenberg movie.
Oh, okay.
It's like a short film. So,
okay. Yeah, interesting.
There you go. Yeah. So, there's 2 out there called Naked Lunch, I guess, and that one is a very short film, basically a discussion of it. So I'll keep trying. I mean, I'm very interested in kind of seeing the film and seeing kind of the aspects that pay homage to the book. Or
and that's part of the fun is you see those things that like they're from the book, and then there's also things that aren't from the book but they feel like they could have been.
Yeah, like the Burroughs life kind of stuff, right? That
but also just some weird, squicky goopiness.
Yeah.
Very.
I feel Cronenberg. I feel like it would be a real good fit.
I know, right?
Yeah.
He's absolutely was perfect.
Yeah.
I think at one point Kubrick was trying to film it or something.
Hmm.
And there was apparently a version of the script that was more faithful to the book that for a long time was moving around Hollywood between different directors. And I tried to see if I could find a copy of it somewhere on the internet because
Mhm.
I would love to read how somebody tried to convert
Yeah.
that to, like a more true to the book kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in theory, you could pick some elements and kind of construct more of a linear type story out of certain parts of the book. Around Islam Inc. and getting out of New York and getting to Tangiers and that kind of stuff, and then have a lot of these extraneous scenes or these less connected pieces be kind of drug trippy type tangents that would happen. But
I almost wonder if a Ralph Bakshi style animation
hmm,
might have been the best way to approach it, because then you can have a combination of more realistic looking animation from like ray tracing and stuff
mhm.
to almost like super psychedelic
Yeah, just
1960s
wild.
style
Yeah.
animation for so much of the other stuff. That might have been the way to do it. Where's Ralph Bakshi when you need him?
Yeah. It looks like we've got Lillian
Oh,
has joined
Lillian
the room.
Anesh
Yeah.
has entered. Hi, no, hi, Lillian.
Yeah. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call,
We're
or you
just
can type out questions
we're just
and
chatting a little bit
comments.
about Naked Lunch.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about that, or if you want to talk about any other band books or movies, we're
Yeah.
more than happy to have that conversation.
That's right. So yeah, I just going back to how one might present this as a movie. There's always kind of a bit of the other option of going like really disjointed and just kind of like scene after scene, jumbled kaleidoscope type
Yeah.
film, and kind of going at it that way.
Sure,
Right?
absolutely.
Like there's enough kind of crazy things here that happen in the book where we've talked about it a lot, where you've got this mixture of excellent writing, comedy, grotesque, wild, icky stuff all happening at once, and you could in a film go kind of back and forth and through all of these scenes in a very um kind of jumbled up way and have something that would be pretty interesting to look at, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be very cohesive per se, but it would make it for a very interesting film to have it all jumbled up like that.
And that kind of narrative is what I had in mind when I talked about how I think it could be done as animation.
Yeah.
And again, like there's a lot of really cool jumbly things that you could only do in animation.
Yeah. Well, and some of the scenes here would be, well, I mean, I guess a lot of live action is these days is basically computer animation, but
Yeah, but see, I think
yeah.
as much as you could do that, I don't know. Like, is that almost too real?
Yeah, you want it. You want the filtering or the lens of a drug trip to make it less. Yeah, because that is the one thing that we've talked about before in this book is like how much of this is not really happening per se.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of this is just something that the drugs are making him see, or the view of it is twisted by drugs, right? So yeah, I agree with what you're saying about having like an animation style that provides that level of distance from reality
Mm-hmm.
versus like true to life computer graphics.
Yeah,
like,
because I feel like that would be terrifying.
wait, that weird dude just absorbed his police inspector.
Yeah,
like,
and look, this other guy
yeah.
is prolapsed
Anus is,
intestine
yeah.
is slurking around on the
And talking
on the
to him.
road,
Yeah.
looking for someone to schlup.
Yeah, yeah.
I
mean, yeah.
And then, I mean, there's just the bigger question of maybe this just shouldn't be made into a movie, like a literal adaptation.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some things that don't need to be seen.
But I mean, yeah, to capture some of the comedic bits of it along with the grotesque, I think there's, I would imagine as a filmmaker, there's a draw here.
Yeah.
Where you go.
I mean, I think there's certain filmmakers, as soon as somebody says something's unfilmable, they'll be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'll film
I
it.
can do
I'll
it.
figure it out.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. But it would be interesting to see someone take a real run at a
you're correct.
Honest to goodness adaptation. Because there's some brilliant parts that are like, it would just be very, I'm just thinking back to the scene of the scientists and the giant cockroach dude, right? Like how it's and then the courtroom piece and like, it would be like totally non sequitur in a like, kind of traditional movie, but it would be brilliant and insane to see in kind of a movie like this. It's just all these little pieces, right?
Now that we're talking about it, now that I'm thinking about it, I might make a prediction that we will see that when this book gets in the public domain.
How many years do we have?
In the
is it 50 years?
In the US, it's life plus 75.
Oh, okay. So
in Canada, I think it might be life plus 50.
Okay.
Either way, what I see happening is like it's no studio is going to make this.
No, this is going to be an independent film for sure.
And it's going to be a kid. It's going to be it's going to be like somebody in his 20s who fell in love with this book, and he's a fucking amazing computer digital creator guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a passion project for him. He's going to spend 5, 6, 7 years on it. And then he's going to put it on YouTube or some shit.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how it has to happen. Is it's going to be someone who's passionate about it, and somebody who can probably do the vast majority of it on his own. It's going to be that kind of like, this is my interpretation of it.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't put it past a more experienced filmmaker either, having this that was a passion project that, now they've gotten to a point where they feel like they can take it on as well.
Maybe, but it would have to be, it would have to almost be like Francis Ford Coppola and Megalopolis, where like he sells his wineries to make that film.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna do a Hollywood version of it, it's still likely going to be, again, if you're trying to do a literal adaptation, it is going to be so surreal,
and it's not going to be a wide release movie, right?
Yeah, but like I don't see any. Maybe someone like A24, who's gonna like the audience for this is so small.
Yeah.
That unless you're maybe Chris Nolan could get the money for this.
Yeah, but even then,
but I don't think he would want to.
Yeah. I mean, that what he has been looking at is more coherent, I would say,
which says a lot for Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's the only name I can think of that A, might be inclined, and B, could get the money.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's where you go back to kind of the animated style, where from a budget perspective, might be a lot more feasible to try and make a run at this using animation rather than
artists are expensive, man.
Yeah, well, cheaper than computer graphic.
Oh, you're talking about classical animation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely a challenge either way. And, based on the, how the film that you watched was put together, certainly not a direct run at a real true to life adaptation.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think we've kind of touched on this and danced around it a little bit, but what were some of your favorite parts of the book, or things that kind of still stand out for you, that you think fondly on?
Yeah. It's definitely the stuff that I've already mentioned that I thought were incredibly funny. The moment where Billy is shooting up and the cops coming in, he's like, "Hey guys, can I just finish up?" That's hilarious. Pardon me. The bit that I read about
the guy in the restaurant,
that I just had a complete brain fart.
Can't remember his name.
I was mid sentence and I just went blank. But yeah, the guy in the restaurant, who's like the prankster, and he goes in and he's looking for ketchup and he just pisses everybody off. Yeah. And I love that so much because I have the same kind of feeling about ketchup. It's noxious. And I feel like even if they wouldn't necessarily, there definitely are chefs who would see someone doing that and just want to just be absolutely livid. Like, how fucking dare you?
Yeah, with my food. Yeah,
like I made that thing to be consumed as it was. Every single flavor is in balance with everything else.
Yeah.
And you've just covered it in tomato shit, you piece of fuck. Those bits, absolutely.
And the premeditation of it with having the 100 hogs,
the 100 hogs ready to go,
ready to go and eat the staff,
right? It's not just one part. This is a multi-layered prank.
This guy knew exactly what kind of prank he was playing here.
Yeah. Those two obviously leap to mind for me. How about you?
Yeah, from a comedic standpoint, definitely the cop scene, like that's just comedic gold. I really enjoyed as I mentioned before, like the scientists, and they are in an uproar because the guy changed a guy into a cockroach or whatever.
Right.
And then the whole crazy, like they all go nuts and burn the place down, and then they have a trial about it, and like it's just so absurd and slapstick to me. That one really stuck out. There's some wacky stuff where like the kind of route around the middle of the book where we just have like the president in the interzone there, and then he's just looking down on the people, all hidey, and then some peasant boy climbs up and they have this like intense conversation, and like it's just like absurd, but like you can see it being presented as this little vignette, cinematically. So stuff like that really stands out. I mean, the Benway stuff is so like off the wall.
My favorite Benway moment still is the using the plunger on somebody's heart. Like, what a fucking doctor.
It's just wild. Like, it reminds me a little bit of that. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a show called Medical Police.
I don't think so.
It's just like a really wild, wacky show. Like, it has a lot more continuity than this book, but like it's that same kind of like slapstick, like, these they're doctors, but also police or whatever. And it's just wild and wacky. And, they get into these odd situations. And the Benway stuff, kind of a lot of it, although more grotesque, reminds me a little bit of that kind of style. And so, just like very comedic, right? The interrogation of the guy who's like, he's just trying to get down to, remember that time when you were at war, and like just leading him down the path. And I could just, you picture that as like done in a comedic style, and it'd be just a kind of a wild interview, there's lots of little bits like that. Even the where the sailor takes the boy to the apartment and he's like, you're gonna pay for this in time. Like, there's a certain aspect of like the young boy not knowing what that means, and like it's just, I don't know, kind of comedic in that sense. And there's lots of little things like that stand out where you go like, and especially because it's kind of brilliantly written, these little scenarios where you can just visualize what is happening. It's just, I don't know, there's so many little good bits. The party that they play the Blue film in,
right,
it is just like wild stuff, and it's hilarious. Like, it's gross, a lot of it is wildly grotesque, but it's like, it's very funny, how it's written and how the actors like are talking to each other and stuff. Like, there's just so many things that are very interesting in this book, especially how they're presented and written. But when you look at it as a whole, you're like, I mean, this book is insane, right? It's a wild drug trip. But when you pick out these little elements, I mean, they're just great, right? On their own. There's all sorts of stuff like that for me. That I think back on rather fondly, and like, that was interesting, or comedic, or like really well written. The chapter that kind of introduces a lot of the interzone agents, or the Islam Inc. agents, where they have the weird party with all the boys, and then they bring in the girls at the end to fuck the boys so that they can calm everything. Like that to me, like, this is another one. It was really well written. it was hard to make sense of at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time, but like it kind of sticks in your mind as like this wild scene. The other scene where Benway's touring the guy around and they go outside and the world is just in chaos.
Yeah.
Right. There's all sorts of crimes and rapes and like it's just
And they get in a
insanity on the
helicopter and
streets.
fly away,
Yeah.
right?
And it's just like you can picture
Like,
that
yeah,
as
I
like
will come
this.
work for Interzone Incorporated. This place sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it's just like these wild scenes
Yeah.
that, just kind of like are both grotesque and insane but also funny, like in terms of how you would kind of visualize that.
Mhm.
And that I think, ultimately when we look at these, the trials and that kind of stuff and go like, yeah, this is a pretty interesting piece of our art, and in a style that was, I think, basically invented by William
Really,
S.
yeah.
Burroughs, right? Like nobody had kind of done this before. It is a, and it's a tough read.
Yeah.
And you're gonna see some bad words and things in here, but I mean, it is a real piece of art,
Absolutely.
as a whole. And even just picking out chapters and reading them, you get that sense of it. So yeah, I look back pretty fondly on some of it, and I mean, some of it's obviously pretty gross, and
Yeah, and
I've never heard the word ectoplasm in a book so often.
No, definitely not. Yeah, and I want to
or
shout
jism,
out,
like
jism, lots
yeah,
of jism.
yeah.
I do want to shout out the man who taught his asshole to talk has another favorite moment. Great story, great anecdote.
Yeah, that's a good one, especially when he takes over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's specifically why I'm not going down the route of training my asshole.
Exactly,
because of that. That's
otherwise
that's a warning to all.
Otherwise, you might have considered it,
That's
but
right.
now that you've read this,
I was thinking about it, and then I read that, and I was like,
guess
okay,
I better
yeah,
not. Asshole, you are staying silent.
That's right.
Yeah, it's such an interestingly written book, that I think, yeah, I agree that like for that reason alone, it's got literary merit, as having this kind of experimental style. And it's the thing about experimental that I struggle. I don't necessarily like saying that it's an experimental style, because in my mind that implies that the person intended to have an experiment.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case. I think this was how he was like, it was written as these individual kind of bits that he then emailed to his friends back in New York. I believe Allen Ginsberg is who he was mailing them to. And then it was only afterwards that they went back and sort of began sort of piecing these things together.
Yeah.
But I think he
did come up with an order and like put this all together.
In the end, he did. Yeah.
Right. So,
but he also said that like this is a thing that you can jump into and read from literally anywhere.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, there might even be some merit to someone reordering the book.
Well, yeah, which in a way
it
is
read, right?
like, if it can be consumed that way, that is it kind of a precursor to his cut up method, where you could like cut up the chapters, or for lack of a better word, and juggle them around, and you could still get a cohesive kind of like as much as the regular book is cohesive. Anyway,
you could right, you could see that. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely a, when we talk about experimental, the word that I was thinking of rather than saying experimental was groundbreaking, right? Because it was so new. But from William S. Burroughs' standpoint, I mean, it made sense, and it was how he wanted to present it, right? But I think for the literary community at the time, right, this is a fairly groundbreaking style in the sense that he's really forging a new way of presenting something and visualizing something in a story or in a book that is not just a linear story, right? Or, and I, obviously there's other books that have done that, but in terms of presenting something that is both reality and not reality at the same time, and getting that feeling across, right? Groundbreaking in that sense. So, I haven't read a ton of books in this kind of similar style, but I've read a couple. but none as kind of well written or as comedic.
For sure, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, he basically did something that had never really been done before. So I'm I'm glad that I read it. I didn't understand everything at all, all the time when I was reading it. Um, and it certainly gives you the feel of being on a trip. But yeah, I mean, it's a great read.
Yeah. I've been digging through my copy of the book here, looking for a specific part of the book, because it speaks to what I was kind of trying to get at when I said I didn't like talking about it as being experimental, and I think
Mhm.
you called it groundbreaking. I think
Yeah.
that's closer. But my issue is that like I don't think he was trying. I don't think he was actively trying to do something different. He
No,
was just
no.
writing as he was able to, and I still love this bit in this book where he says there is only one thing a writer can write about: what is in front of his senses at the moment of writing. And I really feel like that describes
Mhm.
what this book is,
Yeah.
in all of its weirdness and incomprehensibility. He's trying to explain what is in front of his senses,
Mhm.
and sometimes that is incomprehensible,
Yeah. Or
um,
not founded in
and
reality
not found
as
in
we know it.
reality.
Yeah.
And the only way to talk about it or to express it is to use these descriptors that like maybe don't get parsed logically,
Mhm.
but you get the texture of it, you get an
Yeah.
understanding of it. um
You get the kind of ectoplasm of it.
yeah. And I do want to again go back to something I said maybe in our first or second episode, where I talked about how if I hadn't needed to read this for the podcast, I might not have finished it. And then I went back and corrected to say that like I probably would have finished it. The difficulty is trying to read this in a way that you can talk about it afterwards.
Mhm.
Because again, the talking points aren't necessarily literal. They're
No.
not something that can be easily conveyed. This is dancing about architecture. This is like, how do
Yeah.
you talk about the intricacies of what you feel when you have an orgasm?
Yeah.
It's a book that hits you on levels that aren't literal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it lives in a like, metaphysical kind of space, and not really a lot is heavily based in kind of this literal sense. I mean, certainly like sentence to sentence, right? Things make sense sometimes. There's a bit of a kind of plot and that kind of thing. But yeah, the feeling is about presenting a world that was being experienced, that was not based on reality, right? And I think the amazing thing with this book is, aside from the artistic merit of it, is that it really captures that very well of like, is this real? Is it fantasy? Is it drug induced? Like, what is actually happening? Like, I can't pin anything down. You could read this book 100 times and have a different kind of view of things and the whole collection of it each time,
Yeah.
because it is a very good approximation of what living through this kind of drug induced view of the world or of situations is like, right? And I think that that's very hard to do. And the fact that he wanted to try and do that, as a writer, and then succeed at it on basically first try, like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
fair
pretty
enough.
impressive,
Fair enough.
right? And certainly, you know gives us that whole like, you know uh sense of a great piece of art. But yeah, I mean, I know we've had a few tough reads in a row, and then kind of coming into this,
God.
it was tough to keep going a little bit at first, especially once you get a few chapters in and you go, oh, this is going off the rails here.
See, exactly. Yeah.
But I think, similar to you, I had that same thought of like, I don't know if I would finish it, but I think we've both talked about this before, in the sense of like, when we read through some of these books, we're reading it a little bit differently than just for like enjoyment.
Absolutely.
Or, right. So we've got a different lens in terms of like, I want to capture certain things, or I'm looking at plot in this way. And
I know I need to talk about certain things. I need to remember
I
certain
have
things
to
to
get
talk
this
about
point.
them.
And so I think that lens made it difficult, or more difficult to keep
absolutely.
going. And I think, like you said, removing that and just looking at this as a piece of art, I probably would have finished it maybe quicker, or with less doubt, or with less hang up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
there were definitely times
because
I had to
would have been
reread chapters
probably,
because I needed to be able to talk about them.
Yeah, but I think just looking at it on just as a piece of art and not having to know that I got to talk about it later, I probably would have been more invested in the wackiness of it, and that would have carried me along more. Right. Either way, I mean, made it through. I probably am not going to read this through again anytime really soon.
Probably not.
But
I'm glad I finally did, though.
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
This has been on my things to read for a while.
It was fascinating in more than one way.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really appreciate the fact that we were able to read it and, you know, like kind of be part of that, because it's not like a lot of things. And to, you know, when you get into things that are different or out there, oftentimes, you know, it's hard to know if they're good or not, right? Because there's not really a bar to compare to often. But I mean, when you read this book, you get the sense that it is supremely written and insane.
Yeah,
at
those
the same
things
time,
are true. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And yeah, it just makes it tough to go, oh, this is, you know, trash, or this is not worth anything, or there's no artistic merit, because when you read through it, you get that sense, right? You know there is masterful writing here, even though the subject matter and the connection to reality is tenuous at best in spots, right? And I think to be successful at that, as a writer, like it kind of blows my mind in the sense that he was able to put this together in this way, because it's wild and insane. Like, I mean, we've spent how much time talking about like how crazy it would be to even make this into a film, right? Like, just imagine reading through this thing. But it, you know, it is a marvel at the same time. And I'm glad we got a chance to read it.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you want to give it a rating?
I do. Yeah. I think I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5 pound cakes dunked in coffee.
Okay.
You know, I don't like to go to the 100%.
I know you don't.
But, you know, it's another book where I thought about being more in like a 4 out of 5. But, you know, just the timing of it, you know, the effort that he had to go through to kind of get this together. And then, you know, just thinking back in terms of how many actual pieces of this book have kind of stuck in my mind, or, you know, the scenes I can kind of replay that are comedic or gross or wild or wacky or whatever. It hit me today, I think, how much I actually enjoyed this book. And also didn't enjoy certain parts. I mean, there's some crazy stuff that happens, but yeah, how much of it stuck with me in a pleasant way, or in a, you know, a way that I can look at fondly. And so I that's where I kind of get a little bit of the higher rating for me. So
I'm going to go with 4 drops of heroin into an open vein.
Okay.
For me, and it might have been 4.5 if I was reading it to not talk about it.
That bogged you down.
It bogged me down. The impenetrability of some of it, the fact that I had to go back and reread certain chapters just to make sure that I was able to talk about them. Maybe I'm deducting a half a point because of my own issues,
your own hangups,
and it's not really this book's fault. But still, I can only speak to my reaction to it. I mean, that's still a pretty good score, I think.
Yeah.
And it is it definitely among my favorite things that I've read as a part of this podcast, for sure.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah. I again, yeah, like we said, it's probably not something that you're going to reread a bunch of times.
No.
Although it'd be interesting to do that, especially like given enough time in your life, right? To read this when you're 20 versus when you're 40 versus when you're 60
for sure.
Would be very interesting.
For sure.
But also,
and I do think somewhere down the road, it would be worth a reread for me to do that thing where I'm reading it without having to talk about it.
I
To just let
Yeah.
it wash over you.
I will
kind
say
of a
that
thing.
if and I'll make this promise to everyone, if I ever do heroin, I will reread this book.
And
You
then
heard it
will
here
you-
first.
And then will you come on a podcast and talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, if they're still podcasts in that weird future, but
Okay, all right. And then we'll do a special follow-up.
we'll do
on
a
Naked
special
Lunch.
follow-up from the
Naked
hospital.
Lunch part 5 or part
Part 4.
Yeah.
Special follow-up from my rehab
Here
center.
we go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I guess that's
Yeah.
we've talked about this book for
We've
almost an
covered
hour
it.
and a half, and
Yeah.
now we can stop.
Yeah, we can move on to something else now.
We can announce that our next episode is we're going to finish up our summer of sex, drugs, and rock and
Yeah.
roll with the rock and roll part, the film Cocksucker Blues,
Yeah.
documentary about the Rolling Stones that is available on archive.org. Thankfully, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to watch it.
Yeah.
If you want to go watch it and join us to talk about it, please do. It's, like I said, it's available at archive.org. I just want to say that again. And then we're not sure what we're doing after that necessarily.
We've got some ideas that we're kicking around.
Got some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to email us
Yep.
and give us suggestions on things you might want us to cover. Take
and
a
things
look
happen at gmail.com.
That's right. Yeah.
I do hope I'm requesting. I guess maybe I don't have to request because, like, most of the time I'm coming up with the book. But I want an easier read. That's my request for that. We've had some tough books.
We've had a few.
We did have our tough books broken up by Madonna's titty book,
Yeah.
so that was nice.
Yeah, that was an easier.
That was a
read.
nice palate cleanser. But like after this one, I just want something like, maybe maybe the Chocolate War, because like that's set in high school.
Yeah.
How bad can it be?
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, maybe like, is there any kids' book that have been
like
is the new Heartstopper out yet that we can talk about? Or
maybe.
I don't think it is.
No, next year maybe.
Maybe next year.
Season 3 of the show is coming.
I saw
out pretty
that
soon.
I saw that, and I still haven't read, and it's still on my shelf at home. I haven't read the fifth volume of the graphic novel yet. Have you?
I think I started it, and then like they're books that you kind of read in one sitting, and I can't remember what happened, but something called me away, and then I haven't actually come back to it. But I'm getting ready for the 6th book. I think it's like November or December this year, potentially.
It could be. You want to check?
Or it's November, December next year. But yeah, something. Graphic novel.
Graphic novel would be good.
Would be
good. Well, I'm sure Watchmen's been banned somewhere.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. That'd be good. Yeah.
Anyway, we don't know what we're going to do after Cocksucker Blues, but it'll hopefully be casual and fun.
Something less
easy breezy,
taxing on our mental faculties, as we're very busy with other stuff as well, and we love coming and chatting with you guys about this stuff, but it is,
and
sometimes
I do like going into like complicated places, but like
when it's one after another,
you gotta break it up a little bit. And this was all pretty. Going back to fucking Slaughterhouse 5. This whole year has been like
intense.
Reading complicated books that jump through time and logic and Jesus Christ.
Yeah, like a nice linear, like plot holds together.
Yeah.
Like language is great but not overly complex.
Please don't invent your own language for this book.
I could handle something along
no
that
experimental literature.
That's right.
So as always, you can find kind of all of our vital information at our website, blah 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 media.com, BLAH media.com. There are links there to all of our podcasts, link to our merch, link to our Patreon,
link to the link tree.
There might be a link to the link tree, which is silly because the link tree should be what everything links from.
Yeah.
I made a link tree and then I'm not even promoting it anymore. I don't remember what it is. It's probably link tree, linktr.ee/ it might be me. No, I did ban things one, didn't I?
I think it was banned. Yeah, banned things.
Let's find out. Let's do this live.
And what about the YouTube?
Oh, we're on YouTube.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
So if you want to, if that's how you like
is
to
it just under banned things?
No, it would be under when banned things happen.
The full.
People.
Okay.
Yeah. Because Google shut down Google Podcasts, which annoyed me because that was my podcast app. Um, and they've moved now, like all of the podcasts that you would have found on Google Podcasts, they're just now being shifted over to YouTube. Um, and we've actually had on YouTube, this is worth noting, actually, now that we're talking about this. I'm going to just get distracted here for a second. We actually had some good comments.
Oh, okay.
But good comments on the Turner Diaries. It wasn't people who were like, "Oh, you guys are pretending to not be racist, you sons of bitches."
How do they see through us?
I know,
No.
right? Except I don't know how to get. I guess I don't know how to get.
So we had positive non-racist comments on the Turner
non-racist
Diaries.
comments.
Okay.
Did I maybe tell you about one of them? Somebody went in and were like, they basically said that they were writing a paper on it, and they didn't want to dig through the whole book to find something, so they used our podcast to.
That's a great
look it up.
Great way to avoid having to read that book.
Seen this comment
that's for
yet.
sure.
Okay, on the Turner Diaries Part 3, somebody commented, "First, been on a deep dive on the Turner Diaries. This is my final stop, I think. Thanks, guys."
Wow.
How can I just get?
I for one, so I didn't have to read. This was with Todd's previous co-host Oren, but I'm glad I didn't have to read the book and was able to just listen to the podcast episodes and get a sense of it that way. Because one, I guess pro and con, the fact that it was so poorly written, right,
So
making it kind of inaccessible to a lot of people is great, but also like to then have to slog through that and read that on top of all the like kind of racist stuff. Like it's just like 2 kicks to the crotch instead of 1, I think. So yeah, I'm grateful that I was able to just listen to the podcast, and I would imagine for anyone who, and I don't know why you would select this as a topic for a dissertation, but if you're writing something on this book, and
I mean, if you're like writing about hatred, if you're writing about like, what's what I'm looking for? It's like
the zeitgeist of hatred at
the zeitgeist of
point,
hatred, the promotion of hatred. Anyway, here's the other comment from 2 weeks ago. It was basically a correction. One of the things that gets mentioned in the book is something called the organization. And Oren, his conjecture was that it might have been referring to the KKK. And this comment said, the organization is not the KKK. It's the group William Luther Pierce was the head of before his death, the National Alliance. They actually hate the Klan because the Klan sided with the U.S. against the Nazis in World War II. The National Alliance still exists, but they're barely even a shadow of their former selves. Good riddance, in my opinion. I then responded, thanks for the correction / explanation. And this person, James Wilson 6758, said, you're welcome. I went down a rabbit hole in my youth out of curiosity and a desire to answer for myself the question, what do these people believe? Reprehensible as plenty of the people are in the topic in and of itself was one I found interesting. So that was nice.
And it's still probably our top download, I would imagine.
Oh man, I didn't even. Oh yeah. So yeah, this was. Sorry, what did you say?
Turner Diaries still the top downloads.
It sadly is, yeah. This was where the person who was writing a paper on it came in, and it was part of a comment thread from GJL Creative Studios. Somebody left this comment with his like business account, apparently. The performative disgust gets to be a bit much. I get that in order for this video to survive the censors, you have to do some of that, but still, the one guy sounds exactly like the streamer Destiny.
I'm not familiar.
I think it might have been me. I have been watching some Destiny videos recently, and he talks fast.
Okay.
And I sometimes talk fast, so maybe that's what it is. And also, I'm not a. Anyway,
you heard it here first. Todd is Destiny.
I am Destiny, yeah. My response was, this might surprise you, but the disgust is very, very real. And then Hate the Antichrist responded, I think he meant to just say gay as a response, but he went but it tagged me with, and then he forgot a space. So it basically says at Todd Sullivan Gay. And then the cat room said it's virtuous bullshit, and it inspired me to get the book for myself, so I don't got to deal with buffers.
Oh,
So this guy's like, oh, I'm gonna just breed all the hatred to myself.
yeah.
And then I said, sorry that my not being a giant piece of shit was so difficult for you to handle. And this is when Nikki Kelly, 1485, steps in and says, I guess I should have expected a bunch of racists would be in the comments for this content, but it is a little disappointing to see them so bald-faced.
Yeah.
I responded, thanks. It was our most listened to episode. Hopefully most people were as appalled by the content as we were. Nikki Kelly then responds, I needed to double check some things for a paper, and this was far better than reading through a PDF of that shit. Thanks for the content. You have a new fan.
Right on.
So thank you, Nikki Kelly.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, this whole thing was me trying to remember what our link tree was. Is it banned things? Let's see. You can tell we're super pro at this, can't
We're
you?
very technologically advanced here when bad things happen to good people.
Oh, did I type that wrong? I think I might have typed that wrong.
It's probably one we should bookmark for future.
You might be correct. And if I can get it to come up,
yeah,
I might even do that.
But regardless, I mean,
oh, this looks good. This looks like the page I'm looking for doesn't exist. Okay,
either way, I mean, join us at blah Facebook, YouTube. Yeah, we're just happy that you guys are listening, that you're commenting and enjoying a look at some of this stuff without having to challenge yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll take on the challenging
I
stuff.
can't get the link tree up, so just go to media.com. That's got all of our relevant shit. So you can buy merch, you can support us on Patreon, you can buy us a coffee, all that good stuff.
Just a caveat with the buy us a coffee is that
it will be beer.
It will be
beer.
Beer, yes. Well, it will not be caffeine.
It's just that there is no website called Buy Me a Beer or Buy Us a Beer.
That's right.
So that's it, I think, right?
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, as always. It's been a pleasure. If you've spent any time with us at all, we appreciate it, because there are so many other things you could be doing with your time, probably better than this.
Hey, at least you didn't have to read it.
Hey, at least you did. We should workshop that as our new slogan.
Instead of go read a fucking book. Hey, at least you didn't have to read a fucking book.
When we do a really shitty book, maybe that's how we should end.
Yeah, that's how the Turner Diary should have ended every episode.
At least you did. We did it, so you didn't have to. I've been Todd Sullivan.
I've been Peter Allen.
And until next time,
go read a fucking book.